next word or words we want to look at is the meaning of sin. And I could put in this definition righteousness also, because I understand sin and righteousness to be opposites. If I can understand sin, I could understand righteousness. Now there is a key to understanding the meaning of sin. Thoughts produce feelings, feelings lead to action. Sin, therefore, is not simply the action you have committed. Sin begins in the mind. There is nothing you say or do that doesn't begin in your mind. So when we talk about sin, you wouldn't have the outward action without the inward thought. Now just think it through with me. If the Lord wanted to keep us from sinning, He could simply tie us down and we could just wait until He comes back and we would never do anything. But you see, that isn't where sin is. Sin begins in the heart. So if the Lord is going to deliver us from sin, He is going to change the way we think, hence that word salvation, the word faith. Thoughts produce feelings, feelings lead to action. What about right action? You see, I was told one time, well, righteousness, that's right doing. Well, you can't do right if you don't think right. Now the catch is, there's only one that is righteous. It is God. And you're not going to be righteous except He teach you and lead you and guide you. You know, we read Galatians 2:16, I believe in Christ to be made righteous, to be justified by the faith of Christ. Righteousness, therefore, has to do with my faith, my understanding. As I receive His understanding, I manifest His right doing. I only do it if it's between my ears. Now, for some people, when we say what is sin, they'll read 1 John 3:4. Let me read this. Whosoever commits sin transgresses also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. But the way that actually reads is, whosoever commits sin commits lawlessness, for sin is lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. Sin is to be in that place of defying God's law. But combine that with Romans 14. There is another definition that Paul gives us of sin. Romans 14:23. He that doubts is damned if he eat, because he eats not of faith. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin. All right? Again, looking at the word faith, it comes by hearing God. That means my understanding is His, or my faith is the faith of Christ. Anything that's not of His faith, of His understanding, is sin. Let me tell you what it isn't saying. It isn't saying that we read the book and define the law and can therefore define sin. Remember how we began this study. He says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. I'm as different from you as the heavens are high above the earth. So it would help if we would let Him define sin. That brings us to this word study and the word spiritual. Because sin is an inward thing, reading His laws and His commandments for a new covenant believer would be spiritual, or coming from the Spirit applied to the inward man. So all of those laws, all of those things that we have been using to define sin take on a completely different meaning for us. Now I have to use an example here and talk about a word. I'm going to use Sabbath, because I have seen arguments back and forth concerning, well, Saturday, is it Saturday or is it Sunday? Well, it's the seventh day of the week, you say. And what I would like to share with you is, it is neither Saturday or Sunday. If I'm a new covenant believer and I take the Lord's definition of Sabbath keeping, it is from His Spirit applied to the inward man. Therefore, Sabbath keeping is that rest or that experience that I have in Christ, in listening and obeying His voice. Well, what about the seventh day Sabbath then? That was a symbol, a picture, remember, a law written in stone to teach me, ultimately, the spiritual truth of it. When you begin to understand Sabbath keeping is an everyday experience, you're not lowering your Sabbath to the days of the week. You're elevating the days of the week to that Sabbath day. If you'll remember in Genesis, after Adam and Eve were created on the sixth day, they entered into the seventh day. And if you'll go back and read it, there's no end to it. For every other day, there's an evening and a morning. Not so on the seventh, because it's an experience. Once you enter into it, it's a moment-by-moment abiding in Christ. The Sabbath is a symbol of hearing God's voice and being obedient, allowing Him to be God in your life. It is a memorial of inward creation.
If you'd like more information about Scott Stanley and DTG Ministries, please visit dtgmin.org. That's dtgmin.org, where everything is free for the taking, and let God be God.